Today I'm going to be talking about all the sequels I need to read, all the sequels that are currently on my shelf that I need to read. I have a tendency of forgetting that I'm in the middle of a series, and even though I keep buying the sequels, I also keep not reading them. So this is like a wake-up call to myself, and it also shows you guys what series I'm in the middle of in case you think I should read any of them a bit quicker than the others. If you have recommendations, hit me with them down below. So let's get into it. Honestly, the first thing that came to mind for this video idea was the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. I am 4 books in, I'm pretty sure. Do I remember what happens in any of them? No. This is a super famous high fantasy novel. It's kind of like a quest slash like chosen one kind of a vibe. I don't remember much about the original series. I know that the new TV show has come out, and I did watch a little bit of it, and it was really cringy, but it did make me want to return to the series though, because I do remember really enjoying it. I have this one and the next one on my shelf. That one's Lord of Chaos, so I definitely want to get to this. I want to read this entire series, because first of all, it'll be a huge accomplishment. Like, who can say that? These books are fucking beefy. I'll be proud of myself if I finish it. I also want to get to these mass markets before the new ones completely overtake the market, because I hate the new covers and I love these old cheesy ones. But I also just like want to get back into the world and have fun again. So this is number 1. Next one is a newer release. This is The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. This is like a very new sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, which was never supposed to have a sequel. At least I don't believe so. Handmaid's Tale is a very super popular dystopian novel, very feminist. I feel like everyone knows what it's about, so I can't come up with a description right away. I think you know what I mean anyway. I have no idea what happens in the sequel though. I'm really intrigued as to how she could have taken it further. I'm excited to see how the story goes, and I'm pretty sure this is the last one. I don't think she's gonna add any more on us last second, but who knows, maybe she will. We'll have to find out. Okay, so this one isn't, I don't know if this counts as a series, but I'm just gonna include it as like a duology kind of a thing, and that is The Regulators by Richard Bachman, Stephen King. The way my dad explained this to me like 10 years ago was there's 2 books. Desperation is the first one, and then The Regulators is this one. Well, actually, maybe they're switched, but it doesn't matter the order that you read them in. The idea is that he wrote basically the same story, or like the same beginning of the story, but then he changed where it took place. So I believe Desperation is like the Wild West one, and this one is like a suburban neighborhood, whereas Desperation took place in kind of like a Wild West like setting. So yeah, the idea is like to see how the story changes depending on the setting, and I think that's really cool. This one's also a lot smaller than Desperation, and I remember liking Desperation a lot. Nothing in the cover says anything about the plot, so I'll be going into it fully blind, but I think it's really cool to see like how the setting changes things. I'm hoping this isn't like a crazy racist Stephen King book, but we'll have to see. I'll be the test subject for that. Next, we've got like a very different vibe from the entire rest of the video, so I'll just get this one out of the way quick. This is Primo Levi's The Awakening. This is the companion novel to his original memoir, Survival in Auschwitz. So that tells you what it is. Primo Levi survived Auschwitz, and the first book details his entrance into the camp and basically the day that he gets out. This one takes place afterwards. I don't have a 100% clear idea of what happens here. What I do know is that after Auschwitz fell, he wasn't allowed back to Italy right away because Italy was still fascist at that time, and he was held up in Europe for a bit. It tells his strange and eventful journey home to Italy by way of the Soviet Union, Hungary, and Romania. In the interview at the back of Survivor Auschwitz, it seemed like it was almost kind of an adventure. I'm hoping he was able to have like a nice time after all of that, but we'll see if there's any more really sad stuff in here, I guess. But yeah, I'm really interested in the idea of like, yeah, like how did all these people who were liberated manage to find their way back to home and back to normal life? I think that's really interesting. It's a tiny book. The first one really impressed me, so I really want to pick this one up. After that is another newer buy. This is Parable of the Talents by Octavia E. Butler. This is the sequel to Parable of the Sower, which was one of my favorite books last year. I love that book so much. I rant about it whenever I'm given an occasion to. So that book follows a girl. It's a sci-fi story with commentary about climate change. It takes place in the US, way in the future, where climate change has happened and water is a very limited resource. The government has broken down, and kind of someone who survives through this as chaos just keeps going on and on and on. And then also throughout that book, the main character is kind of interested in establishing her own religion, which she calls Earthseed. And if I'm remembering correctly, it's all about change, less deity focused, I think. Who knows? I'll have to get into this. I have no idea what happens next. I don't want to know what happens next. I'm like a little worried to get into this one because I loved Parable of the Sower so much and I thought it ended well. So I'm nervous I don't want like my image of that book to be impacted if I don't like this one as much. I've had a love-hate relationship with Octavia Butler's books so far. I loved Parable of the Sower, I loved Kindred. I didn't like another trilogy that I read by her like at all, so I'm hoping this one is just as great as the first one. And then the last books are just a bunch of fantasy because I know who I am as a person. Next is Thieves by Megan Wallen Turner. This is part of the Queen's Thief series. I can't remember how many books are in it total, but I know that I have this one, and I have, can you see it? The last one right here? So I can complete the series, actually, which is really fun. I love this series. It's full of politics, it's full of intrigue. You never really know where it's going, which makes it really fun. I can't give a description of this, and I'm sorry. The first book, what happens in the first book versus what happens in the last book, there's so much shit that goes on that I honestly can't explain what happened in the first book because I feel like I'm too far past it. I don't even remember the events of the first one. But I think it's enough to say that if you like fantasy, if you like fast-paced, like fantasy with a lot of political intrigue, you should pick it up. It's a really good series, and I kind of don't want it to end. It's gonna have to someday. So after that, we've got The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is the second book in the Lord of the Rings series. Well, I mean, Hobbit is separate, so I think that's a fair thing to say. I read Fellowship a couple months ago, and I liked it. It wasn't like my favorite thing ever, but I liked it enough that I want to continue with it. And I want to see how the books differ from the movie especially. I mean, everyone knows what Lord of the Rings is, I feel, but if you don't, it follows Frodo, who inherits this, like, magic ring from his uncle or cousin or whatever. God, I'm gonna upset some people not knowing anything about what this book is about, like, not being able to say the details correctly. I have the general gist. And then he kind of has to go off on this adventure in order to destroy it. I'm excited to see where the story goes from Fellowship, though, because to be honest, like, I've read The Hobbit like 3 times because I had to read it for school more than once. I read Fellowship twice, I think that's my second time, and I haven't watched the entire, like, trilogy movie in a while, so my memory's kind of hazy. I really want to see what happens next. Also, look how pretty these little editions are. They're so cute. And then the last book I have to talk about today is Shadows of Shelf. Oh, Shelf. Could you imagine? That wouldn't be nearly as good of a title. This is Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second book in the second Mistborn trilogy. So if you don't know, Mistborn is going to be like this grand series. His original idea was to do the same world, the same magic system, but in like a past, present, future kind of thing. So the first one is the original Mistborn series, and that one's like a fantasy novel taking place in the past. And then he wanted to have a more urban fantasy novel and then like a sci-fi novel, all within the same world, just at different points in time. And then he came up with this series, which he initially just started as something fun to do. So instead of going straight to the urban fantasy trilogy, he just for fun was playing around and thinking about what Mistborn would be set in like the 1800s, like very early 1900s, and that's how this trilogy came to be. I did read the first one, the name of which, The Alloy of Law, and I just didn't like it as much as I like his fantasy. I mean, obviously this is still fantasy, there's still like magic and stuff like that, but I really love Brandon Sanderson's fantasy. I'm not so much as into the other stuff that he does. I feel like once he gets past that past time sort of novel, it's just not as interesting to me. And I completely forget everything that happened in the Alloy of Law, so I'd have to like look it up and refresh my memory. But I do still want to continue with the series. I want to see how it's transformed depending on like the place and the time. And I do like Brandon Sanderson. At the end of the day, like, he's still one of my favorite authors, even though something like the original Mistborn I like way more than this series so far. Who knows, like, maybe it will surprise me. Maybe the first one was just a fluke and I wasn't in the right mindset for it. One day I'm gonna have to pick this up. Okay, well, that was all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with another video. Goodbye!